The Cartographer of Hearts. Chapter 1, Lines of Longing. Maya Delacroix pressed her palm against the window of the cramped apartment above Chen's Noodle shop, watching the city breathe in colors only she could see. Below, 3rd Avenue pulsed with veins of amber melancholy, the usual Thursday afternoon blues of office workers contemplating another weekend alone. But there, threading through the sadness like a golden river, ran a current of pure joy from the elementary school 3 blocks east, where children had just discovered the first snow of winter. Once, she had been the city's most celebrated cartographer. Her maps had guided urban development for 15 years, each one a masterpiece of precision and artistry. Now at 43, she survived by creating custom neighborhood guides for tourists, quirky local gems, and hidden foodie havens. A grotesque parody of what she'd once been capable of. The disgrace had come swiftly. One miscalculation in the Riverside Development Project. One overlooked underground stream that turned a luxury housing complex into a muddy sinkhole. The investigation found her measurements off by mere inches, but in cartography, inches could mean millions in damages. Her reputation crumbled like poorly mixed concrete. What they never discovered was why she'd made the error. How could she explain that on that particular Tuesday morning, standing in what would become Riverside Gardens, she'd been overwhelmed not by the topography, but by the emotional landscape beneath her feet? A century of heartbreak had soaked into that soil, from the Irish immigrants who'd lived in shanties there during the 1920s, from the young mothers who'd lost children to the influenza epidemic, from the teenagers who'd carved their names into trees that no longer existed. The weight of all that accumulated sorrow had made her hands shake as she took her measurements. Maya had always seen the city's emotional geography. As a child, she'd thought everyone could see the way grief pooled in certain corners like stagnant water, or how hope rose from playgrounds in shimmering heat waves. It wasn't until she'd mentioned the sad purple fog around the courthouse steps that she'd learned her gift was hers alone. 4 years she'd kept the two maps separate, the physical and the emotional. But as she'd grown older, the boundaries had begun to blur. Now at 43, she could no longer ignore the way love left traces on sidewalks, or how anger carved itself into the facades of buildings. Her phone buzzed with a text from her landlord about overdue rent. Maya closed her eyes and let herself sink into the apartment's emotional residue. The previous tenant had been happy here. She could feel it in the kitchen tiles, a warm contentment that helped her sleep on the worst nights. But there were older traces too. Someone had grieved here deeply, standing exactly where her easel now stood. She opened her laptop and began working on her latest commission, a map of romantic spots in the Arts District for a wedding planning website. As she traced the boundaries of what others saw as merely pretty locations, Maya experienced their true emotional geography. The sculpture garden where 3 generations of proposals had taken place. The coffee shop where first dates either blossomed into love or withered into polite excuses. The bench by the fountain where she'd sat 22 years ago, watching her mentor, Dr. Elena Vasquez, sketch the bones of what would become the city's most ambitious urban renewal project. Elena. Even thinking her name caused the apartment to shimmer with a golden ache that Maya recognized as her own accumulated longing. 22 years of it, layered like sedimentary rock. Maya had been 21 then, a graduate student hungry to prove herself in a field dominated by men twice her age. Elena had been 38, brilliant, formidable, already famous for her innovative approach to urban planning that seemed to understand cities as living organisms. She wore her authority like perfectly tailored clothes, and when she'd chosen Maya as her research assistant, it had felt like being selected by a goddess. For 3 years, Maya had worked beside Elena, creating the maps that would guide the woman's revolutionary vision of urban spaces, designed around human happiness, rather than mere efficiency. Elena had taught her that cities had souls, that good planning meant listening to what a place wanted to become. Maya had never told her that she could literally see what Elena meant, that she could watch contentment spread through a well-designed plaza like ripples on water, or witness how poor planning created pockets of despair that festered for decades. Their partnership had been perfect, professional, electric with unspoken possibility. Maya had mapped Elena's dreams with obsessive precision, and Elena had built those dreams into reality. The Harmony Transit System, the Community Gardens Initiative, the Riverside project that would have been Elena's masterpiece, before Maya's error had killed it and with it Elena's trust in her. Now Elena was 59, a legend in urban planning whose TED Talks had millions of views. She consulted for cities around the world, her latest project a complete reimagining of downtown Seattle's waterfront. Maya followed her career obsessively, reading every interview, watching every presentation, collecting the praise that should have included Maya's name but never would again. Maya's phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice that answered her tentative hello made her apartment flood with phantom sunlight. Maya? It's Elena. Elena Vasquez. 22 years collapsed into nothing. Maya gripped the windowsill, watching the emotional landscape of 3rd Avenue shift into impossible colors as her own feelings bled into her perception. Elena. The name tasted like memory and regret. I know this is unexpected, but I need your help. Maya's heart performed complicated geography, mapping territories of hope and terror. What kind of help? There's a project here in the city. It's sensitive. I can't use my usual team, and I need someone who understands maps the way you do. The way you used to. The way you used to. The qualifier cut deep, but it also held something else. A suggestion that Elena remembered what they'd been capable of together. What's the project? Maya asked, though she would have said yes to mapping Elena's grocery lists. The city wants to redevelop the Fairmont district. Full urban renewal. But there's something wrong with the area economically, socially. 3 different development companies have tried and failed. Properties sit empty. Businesses close within months. It's like the neighborhood is cursed. Maya knew the Fairmont district. She'd mapped it once, years ago, and remembered the strange emotional topography. How sadness seemed to pool in certain blocks like fog. How even successful businesses felt haunted. She'd noted it in her reports, of course, but in the careful language of traditional cartography, challenging commercial conditions and complex demographic factors. I think, Elena continued, that you might see things others miss. You always did. There it was. The closest Elena had ever come to acknowledging that Maya's gift was real rather than merely intuitive. Maya's apartment sparkled with dangerous possibility. When do you want to start? Tomorrow. I'm sending you an address. Can you meet me at 9? After Elena hung up, Maya sat in the gathering darkness, watching her city's emotional weather shift with the evening commute. Exhaustion flowed homeward in gray streams, but here and there, anticipation flickered like scattered stars. People heading toward love, toward hope, toward whatever happiness they'd managed to build. For the first time in years, Maya's own anticipation joined that constellation, a bright point of light in her small apartment above the Noodle shop. She was going to see Elena again. She was going to be useful again. And maybe, if she was careful and clever and lucky, she could finally show Elena what she'd been too afraid to reveal 22 years ago, that some maps can only be drawn by those who know the territory of the heart. Chapter 2. Archaeological Emotions. Maya arrived at the Fairmont district address 15 minutes early, clutching a leather portfolio that contained her best maps from before the disgrace. The building was a converted warehouse that now housed Elena's consulting firm, Vasquez Urban Solutions, and Maya's stomach performed Olympic-level gymnastics as she approached the sleek glass entrance. The neighborhood around the building confirmed everything Elena had said. Maya could see the wrongness immediately. Patches of emotional dead space where even the sidewalks felt hollow, pockets of inexplicable anxiety that made pedestrians hurry past without knowing why. It was like looking at a map where someone had erased crucial sections, leaving only jagged edges and empty spaces. Maya! She turned to find Elena emerging from a black sedan, and 22 years might as well have been 22 minutes. Elena's dark hair was silver now, pulled back in the same precise bun she'd always worn. Her suit was more expensive than Maya remembered, but the way she moved through space remained exactly the same, as if she'd already mapped every step of her day and was merely executing a perfect plan. Maya felt embarrassingly underdressed in her thrift store blazer and carefully mended boots, but Elena's smile was warm, genuinely pleased. When she stepped forward for a brief hug, Maya caught her familiar scent, coffee and the faint vanilla of whatever moisturizer she'd used for decades, and had to concentrate on not trembling. "You look well," Elena said, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. Maya had seen herself in mirrors. The stress of the last few years had carved lines around her eyes and threaded gray through her auburn hair. But Elena's politeness was kind, not cruel. "You look exactly the same," Maya replied, which was both true and a lie. Elena looked like herself, but elevated, refined by success and confidence into something even more formidable than the woman Maya remembered. Elena led her into the building, through a lobby that hummed with the purposeful energy of successful people doing important work. Maya tried to read the emotional landscape of the space, but Elena's presence kept fracturing her concentration. Every few steps, she'd catch a gesture or expression that belonged to their shared past, and the present moment would dissolve into memory. Elena's office occupied the entire top floor, with windows offering a panoramic view of the city Maya had once helped plan. The walls were covered with maps, not just Elena's projects, but historical maps of cities around the world, each one marked with Elena's careful annotations. "I kept this," Elena said quietly, and Maya turned to see her own map of the original Riverside project mounted behind Elena's desk. It was Maya's finest work, a topographical masterpiece that showed not just the physical landscape but suggested, through subtle use of color and line, the emotional flow of the proposed development. Looking at it now, Maya could see exactly where her later error had occurred, the microscopic discrepancy that had destroyed everything. "Why?" Maya asked. Elena was quiet for a moment, studying the map as if seeing it for the first time. "Because it's perfect. Because it shows what the project could have been." She looked at Maya directly. "Because it reminds me that some mistakes happen to the right people at the wrong time." Maya's chest tightened. This was the closest Elena had ever come to acknowledging that the disgrace hadn't been entirely Maya's fault. The Riverside project had been rushed, underfunded, politically compromised from the start. Maya's error had been the final catastrophe, but it hadn't been the first. "Tell me about Fairmont," Maya said, because lingering on their shared catastrophe felt too dangerous. Elena spread a traditional city planning map across her conference table. The Fairmont district looked normal on paper, a grid of residential streets anchored by a small commercial corridor. But as Maya studied it, she began to overlay what she remembered of the area's emotional geography. 3 major development attempts in the last decade, Elena explained. The first was a mixed-use complex, retail on the ground floor, condos above. Construction went perfectly, but within 6 months, every business had closed. Not slowly, not due to normal market forces. They just gave up. Maya nodded. She remembered that stretch of the district, how hope seemed to drain out of people as they walked past the empty storefronts, even when the spaces were beautifully designed. The second attempt was purely residential, luxury townhouses targeting young professionals. Again, construction was flawless, but the units sat empty. When people did move in, they left within months. Exit interviews mentioned vague complaints, difficulty sleeping, persistent sadness, feeling unwelcome. "What about the third attempt?" Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew. "A community center. City-funded, designed to serve the existing residents rather than displace them." The most careful, sensitive planning I've ever seen. Elena's frustration was evident. It lasted 8 months before the board voted to close it. Staff turnover was impossible to manage, and attendance dropped to nearly zero despite genuine need for the services. Maya traced the boundaries of the district on Elena's map, remembering her own surveys of the area. Traditional cartography revealed nothing unusual: stable soil, good drainage, reasonable access to transportation. But emotionally, the district felt like scar tissue, as if something had been carved away and had never properly healed. "What do you think is causing it?" Elena asked. This was the moment Maya had been both hoping for and dreading. Elena was asking for her real opinion, her authentic expertise, not the sanitized version she might offer to any other client, but the truth that only Maya could see. "I'd need to do a complete emotional survey," Maya said carefully. "Map the area block by block, building by building. Look for patterns in the emotional residue." Elena leaned forward, and Maya caught something in her expression that looked almost like relief. "So you still see it? The emotional geography." There it was, out in the open. After 22 years, Elena was finally acknowledging what had always been unspoken between them. "You knew?" Maya asked. "I suspected. Your maps always showed things that shouldn't have been visible, how people would actually move through spaces, where they'd want to linger, where they'd instinctively avoid. It was like you could see into the future of a place." Elena paused. "After Riverside, I wondered if maybe you'd seen too much. If that's why." She didn't finish the sentence, but Maya understood. Elena was asking if the emotional weight of the site had contributed to her error, if the gift that had made Maya's maps extraordinary had also been responsible for their shared downfall. "Yes," Maya said simply. "The sadness there was overwhelming. A century of heartbreak soaked into the ground. When I tried to take the final measurements, I couldn't see clearly through it." Elena was quiet for a long moment, and Maya watched emotions shift across her face like weather patterns. Surprise, understanding, and something that might have been regret. "I wish you'd told me," Elena said finally. "Would it have mattered?" Elena looked out the window at the city they'd once planned together. It might have changed everything. The weight of those words settled between them like accumulated dust. All the conversations they'd never had. All the truths Maya had been too afraid to share. All the ways their partnership might have deepened if Maya had trusted Elena with the full extent of her gift. "The Fairmont project," Elena said, returning to safer ground. "If you can figure out what's wrong with that district, really wrong, I think the city will listen. And I think..." She hesitated. "I think it might be a chance for both of us to do something important again." Maya felt the offer's dangerous gravitational pull. Working with Elena again meant risking everything she'd carefully rebuilt in her small, safe life above the Noodle shop. But it also meant the possibility of redemption, of proving that her gift was valuable rather than destructive. "I'll need complete access to the district," Maya said. "Time to walk every street, visit every building that's still accessible. And I'll need you to trust my findings, even if they don't make conventional sense." Elena's smile was the same one she'd worn 22 years ago, when Maya had first shown her a map that revealed more than it should have been able to. "I wouldn't have called anyone else," Elena said. Chapter 3: Excavations. Maya began her survey of the Fairmont district at dawn on Saturday, when the emotional residue of daily life was thinnest, and she could see deeper into the neighborhood's underlying geography. She'd spent the previous evening poring over historical maps and city records, looking for clues about what might have scarred this particular corner of the city. The facts were mundane. Originally farmland, developed in the 1920s as affordable housing for factory workers, gradually gentrifying over the decades into the kind of neighborhood where young couples bought starter homes and raised children before moving to the suburbs. Nothing in the official record suggested tragedy or trauma. But as Maya walked the empty streets in the pale morning light, the emotional landscape told a different story. The wrongness began at the intersection of Maple and 3rd, where Maya felt a familiar cold pressure she'd learned to recognize as the signature of profound loss. Not just individual grief but collective trauma, something that had affected the entire community simultaneously. She knelt on the sidewalk, pressing her palm to the concrete, trying to read the emotional archaeology beneath her fingers. Layer by layer, she could sense the district's history. Recent disappointment from the failed developments, decades of ordinary life, births, deaths, small joys and sorrows accumulating like sediment. But beneath it all was something else. A sharp, clean break in the emotional record, like a geological fault line. Maya pulled out her surveying tools and began mapping the emotional topography with the same precision she'd once applied to physical terrain. She worked systematically, block by block, noting where the wrongness was strongest, where it seemed to fade, where new patterns emerged. By noon, she'd identified the epicenter. A small park at the heart of the district that appeared normal in every way except one. No emotions lingered there at all. It was a perfect void, as if someone had scrubbed away every trace of human feeling that had ever existed in that space. Maya sat on a bench in the empty park, studying her preliminary notes. The emotional deadness radiated outward from this point in irregular waves, strongest along certain streets, barely detectable along others. It reminded her of a blast pattern, as if something had exploded here emotionally rather than physically, leaving invisible damage that still affected everything nearby. Interesting spot for lunch. Maya looked up to find Elena approaching with 2 coffee cups and a bag from the sandwich shop Maya had noticed on the commercial strip. She'd been so absorbed in her work that she hadn't heard Elena's car arrive. "I thought you might be hungry," Elena said, settling beside her on the bench. "How's the survey going?" Maya accepted the coffee gratefully. Something happened here. Something significant enough to create lasting emotional damage. But I can't find any record of it. Elena looked around the pleasant park. Well-maintained grass, mature trees, a small playground that should have been filled with weekend families but stood empty. It looks normal. That's the problem. It's too normal. There's no emotional residue here at all, which is impossible. Every place where humans spend time accumulates emotional traces. This park has been scrubbed clean, but the cleaning process itself left damage. Elena was quiet for a moment, and Maya could sense her wrestling with how much she could accept, how far she was willing to trust Maya's inexplicable expertise. What kind of event could cause that? Elena asked finally. Tragedy. Something sudden and overwhelming enough to shock the entire community, but also something that was then systematically covered up or forgotten. Maya consulted her notes. The emotional void is about 40 years old. Whatever happened, it happened in the early 1980s. Elena pulled out her phone and began scrolling through her research. 1982, she said after a moment. There's a gap in the city council records. 3 months of missing meetings, and when they resume, there's a brief mention of community healing initiatives and ongoing mental health support, but no explanation of what required healing. Maya felt the familiar thrill of a mystery beginning to reveal itself. Can you access newspaper archives from that period? Already on it. Elena's thumbs moved quickly across her phone screen. Digital archives start in 1985 for the local paper. But, she paused, frowning. That's odd. The Herald has been publishing continuously since 1923, but there's a 3-month gap in 1982. No papers at all from June through August. They stared at each other across the bench, and Maya could see Elena's systematic mind beginning to accept what the evidence suggested, that something significant had happened in Fairmont District 40 years ago, and someone had gone to considerable trouble to erase all record of it. I need to talk to people who were living here then, Maya said. Long-term residents who might remember what the official records don't mention. Elena nodded. I'll see what I can find through city property records. Identify houses that haven't changed ownership since the early 1980s. As they walked back toward their cars, Maya found herself studying Elena's profile, the way afternoon light caught in her silver hair. Working together felt dangerously natural, as if the 20-year gap in their partnership had been merely an extended lunch break. Maya had forgotten how Elena's mind worked, how quickly she could process information and develop strategies, how her presence made any problem feel solvable. "Elena," Maya said as they reached their cars, "why did you really call me for this project?" Elena paused with her hand on her car door. "Because 3 other consulting firms have failed to identify the problem. Because the city is desperate enough to try unconventional approaches." She looked directly at Maya. "And because I've spent 20 years wondering what we might have accomplished together, if I'd trusted you enough to ask the right questions." The words hung in the air between them like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross. "The Riverside Project," Maya said carefully. "If I'd told you about the emotional interference, what would you have done differently?" Elena was quiet for so long that Maya thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than Maya had ever heard it. "I would have found a way to honor what was already there instead of building over it. I would have listened to what the land was trying to tell us." Elena met Maya's eyes. "I would have trusted you completely, instead of just trusting your maps." Maya felt 20 years of regret shifting like tectonic plates. All the conversations they'd never had, all the collaboration they'd never attempted, all the ways their partnership might have evolved if Maya had been brave enough to reveal her gift and Elena wise enough to ask about it directly. "We could have been extraordinary together," Elena said quietly. "We still could be," Maya replied, and immediately felt exposed by her own audacity. Elena's smile was complicated, layered with hope and caution and something that might have been longing. "Let's solve this mystery first. Then we'll see what's possible." As Maya drove home through the late afternoon traffic, she watched the city's emotional weather shift around her. But for the first time in years, her own feelings weren't separate from the landscape. They were part of it, adding brightness to the urban geography, creating new pathways of possibility in the familiar grid of streets. Chapter 4. Hidden Histories. Maya spent Sunday morning in the basement archives of the Central Library, searching for any trace of the missing summer of 1982. The emotional landscape of the building was soothing. Decades of quiet contemplation and the gentle satisfaction of research had soaked into the walls. But she found nothing about Fairmont District that wasn't already in the official records. It was Mrs. Chen from the Noodle shop who finally provided the breakthrough, entirely by accident. Maya was picking up dinner Sunday evening when Mrs. Chen noticed the street names in Maya's research notes spread across the counter. "Fairmont District," Mrs. Chen said, her English still careful after 30 years in the city. "My sister lived there once. Long time ago." Maya looked up from her low mane. "In the 1980s? Yes. 1981, 1982. She moved away after." Mrs. Chen paused, searching for words. "After the bad thing." Maya's pulse quickened. "What bad thing?" Mrs. Chen glanced around the empty restaurant as if someone might overhear. "Many children get sick. Very sick. All at once in the summer. Some die." Maya felt the familiar cold recognition of uncovering hidden trauma. "What kind of sickness?" "Nobody know. Doctors, they have no answer. Children just fade away. Stop playing, stop eating, stop talking. Like they forget how to be alive." Mrs. Chen's voice dropped to a whisper. "My sister's boy was 6 years old, healthy, happy. Then one day he stopped getting out of bed. 3 weeks later he gone." Maya's hand stilled on her chopsticks. A mysterious illness that primarily affected children, concentrated in a specific neighborhood, with no medical explanation and no official record. The kind of inexplicable tragedy that could traumatize an entire community. "How many children?" Maya asked gently. maybe 20-25. In just few blocks. Whole families leave after, too scared to stay. Mrs. Chen wiped her eyes with her apron. My sister never recover. Still live in Chinatown, still light candle for her boy every week. Maya left the restaurant with Mrs. Chen's sister's address written on a napkin and a newfound understanding of Fairmont District's emotional archaeology. An unexplained epidemic that had killed dozens of children would leave exactly the kind of traumatic imprint she'd detected. A wound in the community's emotional landscape, deep enough to affect the area for decades. Monday morning, Maya called Elena with her findings. An epidemic that was covered up? Elena's voice was sharp with professional interest. That's exactly the kind of event that could destabilize a neighborhood's social fabric permanently. I'm going to interview Mrs. Chong, Mrs. Chen's sister, this afternoon. But I think we need to approach this carefully. If there was an official cover-up, there might be a reason beyond simple embarrassment. Agreed. I'll see what I can find through other channels. Medical examiner records, public health department files, anything that might have survived despite the apparent media blackout. Maya spent the morning refining her emotional map of Fairmont District, now understanding what she was seeing. The epicenter of the trauma wasn't the park itself, but what lay beneath it. According to her 1980s city planning maps, the park had been built in 1983, on land that had previously housed a small elementary school. Fairmont Elementary. Maya found the school's records in the city education archive, and the timeline made terrible sense. The school had operated from 1924 to 1982, when it was abruptly closed due to declining enrollment and budget constraints. The building had been demolished within months, and the city park built in its place with unusual speed for municipal construction projects. Maya stared at the old photographs of Fairmont Elementary, a modest brick building surrounded by playground equipment, smiling children lined up for class pictures. She could imagine what the school would have felt like emotionally during its normal years. The bright energy of learning, the comfortable routine of childhood days, the gentle authority of teachers who cared about their students. And then the summer of 1982, children arriving healthy in June, and by August, Maya had to stop reading the records. Even 40 years later, the emotional resonance was overwhelming. Mrs. Chong lived in a narrow house in Chinatown that smelled like jasmine tea and old grief. She was a small woman in her 70s, with careful hands and eyes that held 40 years of unanswered questions. "You want to know about Jimmy," she said when Maya explained her visit. It wasn't a question. Maya nodded, settling into the offered chair at Mrs. Chang's kitchen table. "I'm trying to understand what happened that summer." Mrs. Chong was quiet for a long moment, staring at a framed photograph of a laughing 6-year-old boy. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of a story she'd never been allowed to tell properly. Jimmy loved that school. Loved his teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez. Loved the playground, the library, even the cafeteria food. Mrs. Chong smiled at the memory. Every morning he run ahead of me, so excited to see his friends. When did things change? Middle of June. Jimmy come home from school very quiet. I ask him about his day, he just shrug. Next day, same thing. Then he start having nightmares, screaming in his sleep, but he never remember what he dream about. Maya leaned forward. Did other children have similar symptoms? Oh yes. All the mothers we talk. 20, maybe 25 families, all the same story. Happy children become sad children overnight. They stop playing with friends, stop watching cartoons, stop eating favorite foods. Like someone turn off their light inside. What did the doctors say? Mrs. Chang's expression hardened. Doctors say nothing wrong. Blood tests normal, no fever, no infection. They say maybe depression, maybe stress. Maybe we are bad mothers who imagine problems. Maya felt the familiar anger that came with stories of dismissed feminine intuition, of community knowledge invalidated by official authority. But you knew something was wrong. I know my boy. I know when Jimmy smiled, it used to light up whole room. After June, his smiles look like he wearing mask. Mrs. Chang's voice broke slightly. I know when my child is dying, even if doctors say he healthy. Maya waited while Mrs. Chang composed herself, understanding that this story had been carried alone for 4 decades. The other mothers and I, we try to figure out what changed. Same school, same teachers, same everything. Only thing different was construction. Maya felt her pulse quicken. What construction? They renovating the school basement. New heating system, new foundation work. Very loud, very dusty. Children complain about the noise, about strange smells coming from underground. Mrs. Chang met Maya's eyes. But schools say it's safe, say construction have nothing to do with sick children. Maya thought about the emotional void beneath Fairmont Park. The way trauma had been literally buried under new construction. How long did the construction last? Start in May, supposed to finish in August. But after children start dying, they stop work very fast. Fill everything in, plant grass, build park. Like they want to cover up whatever they find down there. Mrs. Chang, Maya said gently, what do you think they found? The older woman was quiet for a long moment, staring at Jimmy's photograph. I think they find something that should stay buried. I think they wake up something that been sleeping under that school. And I think when they realize what they done, they decide to keep it secret rather than admit their mistake. Maya felt the pieces of the mystery clicking into place like map coordinates. An old school built on land with its own hidden history. Construction that disturbed whatever lay beneath. Children who were sensitive to things adults couldn't perceive. Falling victim to some kind of contamination that wasn't physical but was deadly nonetheless. Mrs. Chang, Maya said carefully, do you think the children saw something? Or felt something that affected them? Mrs. Chang nodded slowly. Jimmy, in his last week, he keep talking about the sad people in the basement. He say they very lonely, very angry, and they want the children to come play with them. She wiped her eyes. I think maybe Jimmy did go play with them in the end. I think maybe that where he went when he stopped coming back to me. Maya left Mrs. Chang's house with a heavy heart and a growing understanding of Fairmont District's emotional geography. The mystery wasn't just about what had happened in 1982. It was about what had been disturbed in 1982, what older trauma had been awakened by construction and covered up by official denial. She called Elena from her car. I need to get into the basement levels beneath Fairmont Park, Maya said without preamble. There's something down there that's been causing problems for 40 years, and I think I'm the only person who can see it clearly enough to fix it. Elena was quiet for a moment. Maya, what exactly do you think we're dealing with? Maya looked out at the city evening, watching ordinary people navigate streets that held 40 years of accumulated grief and unanswered questions. I think we're dealing with a haunted neighborhood, Maya said. And I think it's time someone finally listened to what the ghosts are trying to say. Chapter 5, Descending. Maya met Elena at Fairmont Park at midnight on Tuesday, carrying a bag of specialized equipment she borrowed from her former colleague at the Geological Survey. Elena had somehow obtained permission for emergency infrastructure inspection. Maya didn't ask how, but suspected it involved calling in favors from her years of city consulting work. The park looked different in darkness, less aggressively normal and more honestly empty. Maya could feel the emotional void more clearly now, a perfect circle of nothingness that seemed to push against her consciousness like negative pressure. The basement access is here, Elena said, indicating a maintenance shed that looked like it belonged to the Park Service but was actually built over the old school's foundation. I have keys for everything but Maya. Elena paused, flashlight beam wavering slightly. Are you sure about this? Maya looked at her former mentor, remembering how Elena had always been the practical one, the planner who thought 3 steps ahead and prepared for every contingency. Now she was standing in a park at midnight, about to descend into a basement that officially didn't exist, trusting in Maya's inexplicable gift to guide them toward something that might not have any rational explanation. "No," Maya said honestly, "but I'm sure that whatever's down there has been hurting people for 40 years, and I'm sure I'm the only person who can see it clearly enough to understand what needs to be fixed." Elena nodded and unlocked the shed. Behind the rakes and lawn mowers, a narrow staircase descended into darkness that felt thick with accumulated time. Maya went first, holding a flashlight in one hand and her emotional compass in the other, a device of her own design that helped her navigate areas of intense psychological residue. The stairs were concrete, probably poured in the 1920s when the original school was built, and they descended much deeper than Maya had expected. "How far down does this go?" Elena asked, her voice echoing strangely in the narrow space. Maya consulted the building plans Elena had found in the city archives. The original basement was just storage and utilities. But these stairs go down at least another level. They emerged into a space that bore no resemblance to a school basement. The walls were older stone, roughly carved, and the emotional atmosphere was dense with layer upon layer of accumulated trauma. Maya's compass spun wildly, unable to find a stable reading in the conflicting currents of pain that filled the underground chamber. "Maya," Elena whispered, "what is this place?" Maya swept her flashlight beam across the walls, revealing carved symbols that looked far older than the 1920s school above. The emotional residue here was complex, stratified like geological formations, different types of suffering from different eras, all compressed together in the underground space.